Let's go now to the COP28 conference of the parties. That's what COP stands for. And all these leaders from around the world, of course, on their private planes, have touched down in the oil and gas-rich Emirati city of Dubai. On the agenda, how to combat so-called global warming and how to accelerate the transition to renewable energy. And it hasn't gone as the climate alarmist might have hoped. Joining me now to get the latest on this is a nuclear expert, the former CEO of the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation, Dr Adi Paterson. Adi, thank you for your time. Great to have you on the program. Let's start with nuclear, given I reckon you're Australia's best expert. The French President Emmanuel Macron said over the weekend, come on Australia, get behind nuclear power. We saw more and more countries at COP sign on to declarations about nuclear power, given it's the only emissions-free baseload power source we have. Clearly, there's a global structural shift underway, isn't there?
Oh, there's a huge change. I think we're moving into a phase where they're talking about tripling the amount of nuclear in the world in the next 20 to 30 years. And that will fundamentally transform how electricity is supplied in many, many economies. Reliable, always on, low carbon, load follows, can work with renewables. It is the obvious solution in a situation where we're looking for reliable, low-cost power.
And of course, if we can have nuclear at sea, I don't follow that we can't have nuclear at land, because, nuclear-powered submarines, a lot of that technology, cost and all the things that they say are impediments on land, the government are not seeing as impediments at sea.
I think it's even worse than that, because the infrastructure on land that will support the nuclear navy could just as well support a nuclear power system on land. You can imagine these people coming out of the nuclear navy in their mid-40s, early 50s, and not having jobs to go into. They'll have no place to work in Australia. The navy is a relatively short career for people. You don't spend all of your life underwater. And so I think that, the government is really not thinking about what it is to have 14 or 15,000 people dedicated to underwater nuclear, who cannot be also used to minimise the cost of electricity to consumers, to the people in the street who pay the bills. And so it's not just strange, it's almost as if the desire to really have the good defence of nuclear underwater is not synergistic in the minds of the current government with the lowest cost of electricity in people's pockets, and that's really difficult to understand.
What about the other pledge that was signed over the weekend? This is the one to triple global renewable energy capacity by 2030 and to double energy efficiency. Now, is this possible at all?
Well, the build-out of renewables does the opposite. It reduces the efficiency because you have to build long, thin grids and you have to establish infrastructures that are only available, in the case of wind, 40% of the time. And now a lot of people don't resonate with 40%. Call that 2 days out of 5 you've got wind, and 3 days out of 5 you don't have wind. That means that you have to back it up with something. People talk about batteries. I used to be a battery expert before I worked in nuclear. There's no ways that we can build this grid that they are talking about and have it backed up by batteries and have it work the way that they say it's going to work. In fact, all of the published scientific research and the engineering studies show that when you get above about 40% of intermittent renewables, you're in trouble. And we can see this already in South Australia, where the market price goes negative when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. And in the middle of the night when the wind isn't blowing, you have incredibly high prices. So it's not a market, it's kind of a dream, which is turning into an experiment with our entire society. And I think that it cannot work from an engineering perspective. So quite apart from being a nuclear person, as an energy person, high penetration of intermittent renewables is against the fundamental engineering principles that would give us the lowest cost of electricity.
And what about those comments from Tony Wood of the Grattan Institute today to say, our current safeguard mechanism, which has an effective carbon price, I think, of about $75. He says it's going to have to go up to at least $130 per tonne.
I think there's no way that we can use financial and fiscal mechanisms to deal with something that is fatally flawed in the engineering world. And this is where I think the Grattan Institute is starting to understand more profoundly that when the engineering is broken on day one, the other mechanisms, which are to do with the financial structure of the markets, have to be adjusted in all sorts of arbitrary ways and expensive ways.
Dr Adi Paterson, thank you for your time.